Okay, it's Liz Thompson from Sew with Liz back again to show you the next step in attaching the binding to this quilt for my grandson. Okay, so you will see first of all that I have all my little magic clips. Some people call them magic clips. I think they're made by Clover. There's probably other people that make them as well. I'm not getting paid any commission to sell you these clips. So I just wanted to point out that I have over time built up a collection. They're not cheap. And so I bought little bits. That's why I've got different colors in there. But honestly, they are worth the money. And I have, as I said in the last little video, I took this to the ironing board and I ironed the binding away from the quilt. So was my seam allowance ironed away from the quilt. And now what I've done all the way around the quilt is I have from the front, I have folded over the binding. Obviously it's a folded edge here, so it's not a raw edge, and I'm covering up the raw edges of my seam allowance. Now I left this corner unclipped or pinned because I wanted to show you how I do the corners. Remember that I said to you, let's undo it completely, so I'll show you. We did our little folded miter when we were sewing along here. We sewed off into the corner and then we started sewing again on that side. Well, at my ironing board, the very first thing I did before I ironed the edges of the quilt is I went to every corner and I went shh with my steam iron on that corner to set my mitered fold. All right, and now I can bring this over to the front and I can put a clip in there, and I'll put another clip in over here in a moment, but I just want to show you how I do that lovely little mitered fold. So I put a clip fairly close to the corner and then I simply fold the fabric at that 45-degree angle and I bring it over and fold the other side, and look at that. Just a perfect mitered corner. All right, and you can tuck these little raw edges of thread underneath the binding if they are bothering you, or you can cut them off, whatever you wish. And then my last clip, I'm just going to pop in there. All right, now what I have got to show you here, and I just need to find my screwdriver, is I am actually going to change the foot that I'm using. So I'm going to take this narrow AccuFeed Flex foot off, and I am going to put the wider foot on, and I also want to change the foot sole plate rather that is on this foot, because I want the ditch quilting guide. So I'm just going to pull that off, and of course I don't think I have it terribly handy, so just give me 1 second and I will fetch it from a drawer. And here I am back again with my ditch quilting sole plate for my dual prong AccuFeed Flex. And there it is. It's called the SD foot. And if your quilting foot or your walking foot has a 1/4 inch or a ditch quilting ability, this is one of those occasions when you can really put this to good use. Now I'm going to look at my thread and I'm going to put it against that gray and say to myself, is that gray what I want? Is it too light or too dark? And I'm actually quite happy with the gray that I used to actually attach the binding to the quilt. So I'm not going to change my thread. The thread I have in the bobbin is also the same pale gray. I wound a bobbin from the thread I used. And I'm also not being paid to say this, but I have in the machine an Aurifil 100% cotton thread. I really do like that thread. From the first time I used it years and years ago, I have really liked it. So here we are at the machine. I have the ditch quilting foot on. I have my AccuFeed Flex, which has got 2 feed dogs at the top. Let me show them to you there and there. All right. The 2, and they're going to help move all those layers of fabric through. And what I am now going to do is, obviously, if I stitched as it was now, the stitching would be kind of just where the blade of the ditch quilting foot is, and that's not where I want the stitching. I want the stitching a little bit to the right to catch my binding down. So I am going to move my needle a little bit over to the right. And I think what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to move it just a little bit more, because I want to make sure, no, that's too far. Okay, so I'm actually got it at about 7.2 needle position. And that looks like it's going to be about right, but I will stitch a little and check. And if it's not right, then I will adjust the needle position. So obviously, I'm going to put my little tray of clips here, and I'm going to pop my clips into that as I sew. And again, I have got my needle position sorted out. We did that. I just talked about that. And I also have got my stitch length at a little more than usual. I've got it at 2.5. I just like to have a slightly longer stitch when I'm sewing my binding, because I am going through quite a few layers, and sometimes when you're going through quite a few layers, it's hard for the machine to feed the fabric. And just to give myself that little bit of wiggle room, if it's struggling to feed the fabric, I would not have the stitches so close together, because I've got a slightly longer stitch length. So away I go with my stop start button, and what I'm doing is I am riding that guide or blade, whatever you want to call it, on the foot along the folded edge of my binding. I need to pop that clip off and go again. And when you feel comfortable, you can speed up the machine a little and then stop when you get to another clip. And away we go again, all the way along. And you can build up quite a speed if you wish, but not so much of a speed that you feel that you're losing control of the machine and feeding your fabric and positioning your quilt, because that is when you have oopsies. And then you're going to have to unpick and fix your oopsie. So I'm all about not having oopsies. So I like to just have the speed of the machine at a level that I feel I can control. Now here we are, we're coming up to one of the joins in the binding. You will feel that it is a little thicker than the rest, but not so thick that it's a problem. And I just sew straight over the top of it. And we keep going. And I am going to make sure that I go over my quilt. Once this is done, I haven't quite finished with my quilt. I am going to go through the quilt. I'm going to bury my thread tails. So for example, if I turn the quilt over and find a thread tail for you, of course they're all hiding now, there is a thread tail there where I used my thread cutter on my machine to cut the stitching. And I have a very nice easy way that Melissa Marginette in Manitoba, Canada, taught me some years ago, and I do bury my threads using her method. I could chop them off at the surface of the fabric, but I'm going to do this one properly because this is a very special quilt for my grandson. It's not the first quilt I've made him. I did make him one years ago, but it was for a very little boy. And I think now that he is 8 and he'll be 9 short early next year, I just think he needed a quilt that was for a bigger boy. So I'm going to call this his big boy quilt. And then we'll see how the years go. Maybe he'll get another one in his teens, or maybe he'll get one when he finishes school and goes to university or something like that. We'll just see what life unfolds. All right, so here I am. I've come close to a corner, and I wanted you to see this because what I did with the folding of that miter is I popped a clip onto the corner to hold that in place. So I'm just going to remove those two clips now, and I'm going to hold my finger, and I'm going to go slower, because I can see that this blade of the ditch quilting foot has partially pushed this side of the binding. So I want to raise the presser foot and just squish that binding back into place. And then I can put the presser foot down again, and then I know that I'm not going to have an untidiness in that corner. All right, so I've come to the corner. I have got my, I've just switched on. I forgot to do it earlier. I've just switched on my needle up, down, and now every time I stop, it's going to stop with the needle down in the fabric. Now, as I say, I am not going to go around the entire quilt having you watching me stitching in the ditch just to the left of the binding. I think you get the idea. It's a matter of just repositioning the quilt, stopping to take the clips out, making sure that you stay nice and straight, that you've adjusted your needle position and it's stitching where you want on the binding, that you make sure at the corners that everything is lying nice and flat, and so on. So let me show you what it looks like on the back of the quilt, because we're stitching here and our bobbin thread is also going to be on the back of the quilt. Now the bobbin thread is not showing on the binding. The bobbin thread is showing over here. Actually, let's just see. No, it's here. That was my quilting. This here, where my fingernail is going, is actually the stitching, and it kind of almost overlaps with the quilting there, and then over here it separates again. And so that is what the back is going to look like. But because I chose that very light grey thread, it's almost, not quite invisible, but it's not far from invisible. And I don't think that's anything that you would be displeased to see on the back of the quilt. So as I say, once I've finished this, I will then go around the quilt, bury my threads, check to see there's no loose threads hanging out anywhere or little bits of fluff on the quilt, and then it's going to be folded up into a nice big zip seal bag, and that is going with me on the airplane. It's not going in my luggage because this is too precious. I'm actually going to put it in a little hand luggage bag or case, and carry that onto the plane with me, so I know it's not going to disappear on some tarmac at some airport and not arrive for me to give to my grandson. So I think that's all I have to show you on this quilt. I did mention that I would show you another way of joining your binding strips, and I will get to that sometime in the next few weeks or months. But in the meanwhile, you've got a blog post on sewandlearnwithliz.wordpress.com. Below this video are the links to all of those things, where I go through in a lot more detail exactly what I did step by step, from embroidering the blocks to putting the sashing together, how I quilted it, and now you've got these videos on how to attach the binding. So thank you very much for watching. Please drop me a note in the comments below if you liked it or if you didn't like it, and I will then know what I can improve in future videos. Also give me ideas of topics that you would find useful in your sewing and quilting. So as I say, thank you for watching. Join us again on Sew with Liz at my blog or on the YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. See you again soon.